Sorry, a minute late there. Well, thank you, Paul. I appreciate you stepping up, and I know that you'll be a great representative on behalf of community recreation. So thank you, thank you.
Yeah, and Paul, having worked with you in the NMI Star Met, I think that you're really well suited to this. So I think you're gonna enjoy the process.
Well, thank you.
So it's always great to hand out money to people, especially those that are doing great things for the town.
Cool. Thank you.
It's a great way to see the depth of sort of ideas and creativity in the town as well too, which is nice.
I look forward to it. Thank you for your support.
Great. And lastly, with appointments and meetings, I wanted to bring up that the Commonwealth has approved for virtual meetings like this to continue through September 1. And so I wanted to get a pulse from everybody on how these are going. If you want to continue through the summer virtually and then plan to come back in person in the fall, we'll wait for more directives to come out in September or before September. But just wanted some feedback to see what people were thinking and feeling for the summer months here.
Well, I have some input. This is Pete. And I've been doing a lot of Zoom meetings for various groups and all, and I can't wait to get back to live in-person meetings. As soon as it's legally possible for you to do this, I would love to get together and meet face to face and do it the old-fashioned way. That's my preference. I have no fear of COVID. I've been vaccinated. I'm not worried about it. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you.
I have a baby coming in 4 weeks or less, so as our third, so it'll be a little challenging if we have in-person meetings. At the same time, I understand Pete, and face-to-face I think is really exciting. It might be a little challenging for me, but I can make it work if I need to. So.
Yeah, I think in person would be great. I'm just at the chair's breakfast, there was some discussion about the virtues of actually continuing Zoom meetings for public participation. I'm wondering from the select board point of view, Matt, what the kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, so I think that we had a discussion the other day because we were actually supporting legislation that is pending to actually enable remote participation. And I don't think it's so much to have the whole meeting be remote, but to enable remote participants to continue to, be a part of the quorum and to vote and all of those things. Because I think that just like Jen's situation, that people have situations in which it's really very beneficial to be able to be remote occasionally. And while there are concerns, of course, with just open meeting law in terms of the transparency of decision making and so on, I think that what we found through the COVID process is that those issues don't seem to have come up much. And that secondly, public participation is increased because there is an option for people to, engage with the town government without having to be physically present. So I think that while again, people should feel that they can meet in person, if they wish, once these, changes come in the next couple of weeks, or actually next week. But I think that we should also find ways to accommodate remote participants if at all possible. And so we hope it becomes a permanent thing. Charlie Baker just came out with a new statement of legislation, like you said, Anna, to extend to September 1st, giving the legislature more time to actually work through the issues, because I think they were running up against this deadline and clearly they needed a little more runway.
I think that makes sense. I mean, I would personally like to be back in-person meetings. Logistically, it's a lot easier for me as a parent to do them on Zoom. But, finding a blended approach would be great. And especially at this, so hopefully we get some new members soon, but if Jen is offline for a chunk of time with a new baby, then we may have some quorum issues, possibly.
Yeah, June might be an issue. I could, if there's like a hybrid approach, which sounds really appealing, at least the first couple months, I could definitely jump on in July, August, not a problem. So I guess we'll just see how it goes.
Okay. So why don't we do this? For June, let's stay virtual. Let Jen get settled. Camp starts the last week of June, so that will be a busy, good week here. And then at our June meeting, we'll make a final decision for July. And typically we've taken, what is it, August off, Casey?
August.
We usually
August.
don't have an August meeting anyways. So we're really just looking at June and July. Maybe we keep it as is, and then no September 1, unless something changes dramatically, we're back in person. So if everybody's comfortable with that for the next 2 months, I'd propose we stick with that. And then September 1 will be our back face-to-face opportunity at the Hunt Building. Does that work for everybody?
I think that sounds good. And ideally, younger kids will start getting vaccinated soon, because that's the other sort of risk factor that I carry with me. Just even though people are vaccinated, I'm around little tiny unvaccinated humans whose personal hygiene are not stellar.
I hear you, sister.
Right.
My
Great.
whole household.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate all that feedback. And again, Paul, so we will jump now to the department updates, and we're going to start with Kate being here, a finalized conversation on the administrative code update, and then a quick touch upon strategic planning. So I'm going to share the revision that I emailed most recently, so we can all see that. Okay. Everybody see that okay?
That's great.
Yes.
Okay.
So I appreciate everybody coming back and continuing this conversation. I am certainly in no way trying to dictate what the commissions should think is, their administrative responsibilities. And I think that this needs to be a dialogue. What I tried to do is take some ideas from neighboring communities and from some of the other administrative codes for some of the other commissions that are non-regulatory. So, focusing on Council on Aging and a couple of the other ones, and just kind of put it into the same format as that. So I also tried to use active verbs instead of will provide, or, you're providing guidance or provides guidance, that kind of thing. I made sure that it was clear that, we have a town manager form of government. That's something that, has been something that has been a theme throughout these administrative codes, and wanted to put in, providing and making it clear that my understanding and my hope and my desire has been that the commission serves as really the sounding board to the operation. I think that it has, at least in the almost 7 years that I've been here, has been really the backbone to try to help the town administration and particularly myself just navigate some of the things that, I don't know, because I'm either not a resident, or I haven't been in Concord long enough, or earlier on there was some people who were very, very senior, who are sort of, pillars of the community and really, thought of as the cornerstone to the department, who were leaving, and what does that mean? And so I'm hoping that, this captures it in a very succinct way, but if it does not, I'd love to hear the feedback, and I'd love to sort of understand what I'm missing.
I just had a couple of questions, Kate, and I don't recall the exact word. There's been so many versions of this.
Sure.
And we did have a discussion on the role of the commission and Casey, especially in recruitment and of certain positions. Number 3, is that word changed a bit? Because now it seems that it's a little bit more general, certain positions as requested by the town manager. I'm fine with that, but I'm just wondering, is that a wording change from the previous version?
it is, yes, it is a wording change. Part of it is I'm not sure if it was the last version or the version prior, but it basically said it was for, it kind of spelled out the certain positions where it said director, assistant director, and I think a BD manager. And I thought, well, if we're going to be revising this, we should say, frankly, we should open it up to anything as long as it's a discussion and with the approval of the manager type of thing. Because there may be a time where Anna, as a department head would come to me and say, gee, we're really trying to hire an assistant general manager at BD. And it would be really great if we could have a commission member because that community perspective is really instrumental. And then I would bring that to the manager and say, I understand that this isn't necessarily at the division manager level, but we think it's really important to have this community member have some feedback because they bring a perspective that, the other staff or the other people on the panel don't have. So I tried to make that more broad. So if that doesn't capture that, I can certainly think of a couple of different ways to say that, but I guess that was the impetus behind that.
Okay, then
With
the-
saying senior staff, Paul, maybe make that back to some of the thought process before. And Kate, you were trying to open it up so it wouldn't just be the senior directors, it could be assistants as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, recreation has so many hires in a given year that I am hesitant to pigeonhole it to one, because if you have somebody, say Anna has a couple of key persons that are out for some extended period of time for whatever reasons, perhaps they're, vacations, there's a medical situation, whatever, and she would like the ability to be able to lean on a commission member for something, as simple as hiring camp counselors. I think I want to leave that opportunity open. Now, that's not to say that any commission member would necessarily have time, but if there's a situation or something that dictates that, and she says, geez, this would be a lot better than getting somebody from XYZ department, because certainly the commission, I think, holds, a lot more cards and understands a lot more than, perhaps getting someone from the light plant, for example, to be working on hiring camp counselors. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I always try to write these things for the worst case scenario. And so it doesn't require it, but it certainly would allow it.
What about if it said senior staff and certain recreation staff recruitments?
I don't see anything wrong with that. Certainly it seems completely reasonable to me.
But they're both as requested or directed by the town manager. So you're just adding that. Is
Right,
the
and that would
intent
be consistent with our charter, for
Right.
sure. Yep.
Matt had his hand raised, but now he's back.
Well, I just wanted to at least enshrine that the director position should be consulting the commission in any hire. And, if it's only at the request, as requested or directed by the town manager, that would basically give, and I doubt that this would ever happen, but it would open the possibility that the town manager could just hire a recreation director without consulting the commission. I don't know that we need to enshrine a number of positions in there, but I think at least the recreation director, and, so it should say like recruitments and evaluations of the recreation director and other staff as requested or directed by, you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I just think calling that
Okay.
out, I think the director, well, maybe the BD center director doesn't necessarily make sense that way, or whatever, or we can't even anticipate what facilities are going to be there in the future. So, enumerating all these other positions doesn't make sense. But the director, I think that is a distinguished position.
This is Pete speaking, and I agree with you. I think that the senior job in the recreation department should be, if it's open, candidates should be reviewed along with the town manager by the Recreation Commission. It's an important slot, and we should participate in that. And I think that should be said explicitly, not implied.
Okay, so just candidly, that has to go back to the town manager because it was worded in that version before. And of course, I can't make that determination or decision. So I'm happy to bring that feedback back to the manager and explore that with them. I know it was a source of some discomfort before, but I will, and not because I believe that he would seek the advice, but I think I just want to make sure I can't commit to it. And I just don't want anybody to think that when we leave this meeting that I'm committing to that language because I don't have the authority. To do so.
I'd like to hear what other members think because I just gave my opinion. Perhaps I'm wrong about that.
Well, Pete, I agree with that. I'm just wondering, whose discomfort are you speaking of? The town manager's discomfort with that? Or?
Well, it just, there's a thought of it being a little inconsistent with the charter. And so I just want to be cognizant of that. And I don't want to make, I don't want anybody to feel that I'm agreeing to something that is in contrary to the charter. That's all.
Well, I would agree with that, Pete. I think there's two parts to this. I think one is a bit more explicit. I think we're saying, and I think Matt implied that we should have a role in the director level appointment. And then the second part is other positions as requested. I think that was the sense of several comments here.
So Anna, can you just put that in? Oh, you did in a comment on
Yep.
the side. Perfect. That's great.
Kate,
Yep.
are there other boards or commissions that, do per their administrative code play a role in the vetting process of a director, as discussed by Pete and Paul?
Generally, the wording is at the request or at the appointment of the town manager. There isn't anything that's explicitly called out
So like,
that I'm aware of, but I will certainly look into that further.
I mean, just, yeah, like the light board as an example would be one to look at.
So the light board's a little tricky because the town manager actually is the person who's the light board, although they have a director of the light board, it's the town manager who is the light board executive director. So that one's a little bit different. So the ones that I looked at were Council on Aging and a couple of the other SMT levels, planning board or other things of that nature, which, again, call out the inclusion of the boards and committees. Certainly, they just don't require it.
Right. And I would agree that the planning board, yeah, it doesn't have that. I mean, because there's more than one board, frankly, that's under that planning director role, NRC and ZBA. So it's not as much of a one-to-one mapping.
Sure. So other than that, are there any other?
Where is
Yeah,
a copy of the charter? I just was curious about.
Oh, sure. It's actually on the town website. And
I saw a paragraph, but I didn't see a full charter. I don't know. Recreation. I just Googled Concord Recreation Commission charter and I got to the recreation.
okay, so it wouldn't be a commission charter. So the only
town
charter
charter.
is the town
Oh,
charter.
it'd be in the town, okay, so reference to the town charter. Got it.
Right, correct.
So Kate, I did have, Paul again, I have a number 9.
Okay.
So first of all, I do think that the two, there are actually two things in there. I think the two sentences are different and maybe there should be 9 and 10. I think the first one on reviewing strategic plans, making recommendations regarding updates.
I see. And then a second one is provides input regarding, I like that. That's great. Yep.
Improvements and
Yep.
recommendations. So excuse me?
That's perfect.
So
I
think
agree
that's
with
9
you.
and 10. Now,
Yep.
okay. And on 9, that changed, I think, as well, because I'm reading that because I know we've had a slight conversation about strategic plans. You have review all recreational and park related strategic plans. That implies more plans than is under the recreation department. Is that the intent there?
It is, because we now have the division of parks and playgrounds under facilities.
Right.
And right now, we don't have a strategic plan, but I think that we should. And I serve as a department head for that. And I think that there needs to be some oversight. And I guess in my mind, the natural place to put it is under perhaps this commission, because you all also serve the persons who are most likely to use it.
So you're saying a department strategic plan would incorporate plans of other associated departments?
Just the facilities. So instead of just
Facilities.
having the Hunt facility in Emerson, I think we need to look at sort of town-wide sports facilities,
Right.
town-wide open space facilities, because with Giroux and White Pond now coming under the rec department, we don't have those captured in any type of strategic plan. And they likely should be.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think the wording probably needs to be, because in reading it, looked like there's the two separate department plans. I think if you're
I
saying that
see, okay.
that the
all right.
parks facilities part of that, which is
Okay.
which is quite central to a lot of recreational activities. So
Okay.
it's really the department strategic plan, including facilities that may be under the purview of other departments. I don't know how to word it, but it was a little
Yeah,
ambiguous.
okay. So I see Anna's writing a thing. So let me see if I can research just some better language for that. I understand. So you're right. It doesn't really spell out the point. So let me see if I can make that a little clearer. That's helpful. I suppose I should ask, is that, do you all agree that, you know, we have these parks that are coming online? Giroux is going to be done in, you know, less than a year. White Pond is starting up in earnest probably in the next 6 to 8 months. And while Giroux wasn't a surprise necessarily, it was a bit of a surprise in that, you know, it came up for sale and we wanted to sort of be able to jump on that opportunity. And White Pond certainly was a surprise because it was a gift. And both pleasant surprises, but certainly nothing that was captured in any strategic planning. And, you know, it would be helpful for us to be able to communicate to the community what it costs to operate these things, what are our long-term plans, if any, what are the, you know, maintenance responsibilities, either capital or otherwise, once the, you know, initial projects are complete. And I see that fitting nicely here, but I'm certainly open to you telling me that I'm, you know, barking up the wrong tree.
I think it makes sense. There's a lot of facilities that support the mission of the recreation department. For example, the new Concord Middle School gymnasiums, right? That's a facility that even if it's not, quote, owned by the department, it should be included in a plan.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Which I think is consistent with the previous plan, because I think the previous plan did include facilities, you know, across town, no matter who's really kind of owned and operated those facilities.
Yeah, and the other piece that I'm hoping for, and Kate, like, including the facilities plans and parks plans, you know, we've talked about Ride Out Park, for instance, and as we hope to improve some pieces and add some different amenities, such as, you know, new benches for the baseball field or new benches at the tennis courts, things like that, we need to make sure that we have a future vision for what the park should look like, and what are the requirements of the materials that we want to be placing in our parks, and what's the look that we're going for. You know, so we're not getting requests, we or the facilities department or public works, getting requests from outside user groups that are willing to donate a product, and we say yes or no willy-nilly. We'd have a document that we could look to guide us in making some of those approvals or requests for adjustments, things like that. So I look forward to that opportunity to guide us. And that's been in a couple of short months that I've been in this role and dealing with that stuff. I've seen quite a bit of that already.
I agree. And I think further, I mean, I think it makes sense for the recreation department to be the one that has sort of the layout and keeps tabs on what the recreation assets are in the town, because I think there are some contentious debates that go on when it comes to some recreation opportunities that conflict with some housing opportunities as well. And to be able to make very thoughtful, evidence-based recommendations and give public feedback on that is important, both for transparency, but just to, for the community in general going forward. One question I have that's a little bit more specific, Kate, where do school playgrounds fit in this mix? And I don't want to open up a can of worms, but
Sure.
and I know, I guess my question is, because they still are considered a recreation asset. They're limited in their hours, but who owns them? Is it the schools, which generally don't spend capital money on playgrounds?
Mhm.
And usually they rely on outside organizations, PTOs and whatnot to fundraise for it. But then who's doing the maintenance and who's holding the bag for that? And, what is rec access to some of those during appropriate times? It may be that there's opportunity for a better partnership there. But again, this is way above my pay grade. But I do think those are counted in, our town's recreation assets, whether they sit under rec specifically or the schools.
Well, you're absolutely right. They are absolutely counted, and they are not captured here because they aren't the property of the town, and they haven't been thought of as far as the town rec department. But that doesn't mean that I don't have any knowledge whether the subject has even been broached. So what I can tell you is that in the time that I've been here, we've never discussed it. And it could be entirely possible that we approach at a staff level, the superintendent or the school business manager, and say, we'd like to include this in here. And, what do you think about having a discussion between your board and the select board or whomever about, the maintenance of all town playgrounds and having one townwide playground safety inspector. My understanding is they had a school safety inspector because that is a dedicated course. And we used to have somebody that was employed at Highway and Grounds, and that person has left. And so for a while, it was just me and one member of the rec department. And we have since sent one of the parks and playgrounds that's part of the division of facilities. And so we actually have 3 persons now on staff under recreation that are playground safety inspectors. And I think just in the interest of not only teamwork, but doing the right thing by the people in town, it would make sense to ask the question to the school department, ask them if they have one. And if they don't, offer our services, at least for the inspection purposes. It's not a heavy lift. I can say that because I'm not performing those duties, so I'm signing someone else up for them.
In fairness, becoming a playground inspector is no small feat. There are lots of regulations that need to be followed. This is like the shock attenuation.
It's just a lot of math. I remember saying, yeah, I barely squeaked by. I thought of myself as a reasonably intelligent person until I took that exam. And I thought I felt as big as, an ant. It's just, so you're right. It absolutely is. And it's expensive, and I think it's expensive to keep it up. You have to take the exam every 3 years. So, if it's something that we can offer the school, I think that, I can't speak for Anna, but just having seen it, the rec department has a really good relationship with the school. And it's, I think the least we can do just in partnership. As far as we see something, who's going to pay to fix it? That's another conversation.
It's a whole different ball of wax, which I totally appreciate.
I think
probably outside of my purview and scope.
Fair.
But
those fields, like the fields at Sanborn, the fields at Alcott, they're used for baseball, town baseball, for soccer, for lacrosse, and things like that. So I think as we look at from 10,000 feet, what are the recreation assets in the town? Leaving those out would be hard, but at least putting in like an asterisk, they are only used during a certain time but this is where it is and who uses it.
Yeah.
I think this is
I agree.
this is a very important topic, and I like Casey, your nomenclature of recreational assets is really the perfect one. And if I don't want to be too grabby here, but if in the last sentence in number 9, you talk about passive recreational sites as well. So there's a lot of outdoor recreation which has nothing to do with playgrounds or fields. We have trails. Now that's under the purview of somebody else, but in terms of looking at the assets and maybe even, there's a lot of coordination that's needed in a strategic planning exercise for the department, because it should include, the recreational assets. And so the parts of any plan that we put together has to be under close coordination and maybe even written by other people. But I think defining the universe of recreational assets may be the very first step. And I think we should go large, and if we have to go small, but we're touching on a lot of important pieces here. Passive and active recreational assets owned and operated by us and others, and
So Paul, as it relates to numbers 9 and 10, in Kate, I think it's helpful to know where we need to stay in our lane and not venture too far out, because there are charters that, dictate certain structures and whatnot, but that, our assistance in reviewing certain things, whether it's through the playgrounds and facilities division and whatnot, could be something that is at least mentioned broadly.
Yep.
So it's there if needed, because I think also being thoughtful to the amount of volunteer time that takes. And
Yep.
well,
So-
a really good example, I think the recent discussion and our support of the Concord Middle School gymnasiums, right? So it's clear from the old strategic plan that indoor facilities, indoor recreation is a deficit. And that could very well fill an important role in town without us having to build something, Hunt Gym West or something. So, that's a really good example where I think some cross-department thinking in terms of defining these recreational assets is really important.
And if everybody's comfortable with the wording that's on here, I think this discussion is naturally leading to our next discussion on strategic planning. So just to summarize this document, is there any other wording or adjustments that we see as being imperative before we move on to that next
I
conversation?
was hoping to return back to this number 3 after having consulted the town charter and try to come up with a wording that would work.
Okay.
Because I do see the issue, that indeed, in the town charter, it says the town manager shall appoint on merit and fitness alone and may remove for cause. And then it says, all other officers, boards, committees, and employees of the town, with the exception of elected officials and that are, listed, and those that have other, appointing authorities. So totally, makes sense. We actually recently had a case where we had, the town manager needed to act in that regard. So I just think maybe advises the town manager, on senior staff appointments, and, so advises rather than participates, because it's very difficult to say, what do you mean by participate? And then, the others are as requested or directed by the town manager, but something like that. Anyway, just something to take forward, advise. It's an advisory role. It's clearly, the town manager doesn't have to take the advice, but it's certainly a good practice.
I think that's great. I think it, in my opinion, conveys that there's an involvement there, there's an underlying involvement, and, certainly it hasn't been my practice that any board or committee advises something to the town manager and it's just unilaterally ignored, which is
Right.
great.
No, I don't
because-
expect this to
So
have any
I would
difference
imagine
either
that
way,
it would
whatever
be.
we write, but,
Right.
just try to make it reflect what people would expect.
Do you mind just plugging that in there, Anna? I mean, you and I can go through grammatically, but just so we don't forget that, because that's
Yep.
She's got it in there.
Oh, thank
I
you. It's so
added it.
small, and I'm Even with my glasses on, it's like.
And get your magnifying glass. Matt, thank you for checking out the charter and reviewing that. I think that makes a whole lot of sense and keeps us appropriately in our lane.
Well, as a select board member, I probably should have it committed to memory, but unfortunately, do have
It's
to look at it.
it's several pages. That's a.
Yeah.
It's not
Like
short.
the
It's
US
not short.
And like the US Constitution, you could drive a truck between various pages, and phrases, but there it is.
I think if we're good on number 3, thumbs up, we're good on number 3. Does that feel good for right now? And Anna, you have that language, and I think we hopefully have covered that. 9 and 10, those look good to me. Is there other wording that needs to be in there?
Well, I'd like the chance to revisit that based on the feedback that I got with just trying to incorporate, not just to make it clear that it's recreational assets versus just saying active or passive or something like that.
So
It
town
kind of leads into
recreational
our next.
assets.
Yeah, I like that terminology, and I just want to make sure that doesn't ruffle any feathers unnecessarily. But if you can give me a day or two to take a look at that, I can kick it back out to Anna just with a few sentences.
Great.
Just my last comment on that, Casey mentioned swim lanes, and I think that's really important. It strikes me in the conversation, facilities and playgrounds and fields seem to be on a swim lane. I'm not sure whether trails, the whole trail system is in our swim lane or not, even though it's recreation. So it's just a comment.
So I can tell you, because I knew that you all were interested in updating the, master plan or something along those lines, that many communities have taken to doing an open space, so recreation facilities and open space plan. And I preface this is not a conversation that I've had with Delia Kay, but certainly would be something, because we're starting now with the initial infancy of the conversation that will eventually develop into a proposal that goes to not only to your board, but probably to the NRC and maybe the Trails Committee, and then ultimately to Finance Committee and the Select Board for funding in the capital plan. And so I think we should have a plan A and a plan B, and A should probably be one that's all inclusive in that manner, and see if there's any interest on NRC's side, because they do a phenomenal job with all of that. And they may say, look, we love the idea, but we just don't need it right now. They have one that isn't relevant, it isn't too old. And so then we could write, an RFP or even, some type of scope of services that says, you're not going to work with these people directly, but we want you to incorporate their plan from, and I want to say that their last one was updated. Well, Matt, do you happen to know that? I know you were on planning, so that's probably not the same thing, but didn't they do that in like 2017 or 18?
I'm sorry, what did we do? I missed that.
Well, it would have been the NRC, so it wasn't exactly the planning board, but that open space
Plan?
Assessment and master plan.
Well, yeah, and then, the planning board does their housing production plan. There are various of these strategic plans that then get rolled up when we do the whole long range plan for the town, but
Yeah.
they're typically more detailed, and, we would expect, like this recreation strategic plan to be similar to one of those.
So you all had a strategic plan, but it was really limited to recreation facilities, and it was basically completed right before I began. So it was in 2014, pretty much at the retirement of Danner DeStefano, and right in the interim phase before I was hired, when my predecessor was also retiring. And so I didn't have a lot of involvement in that. And although it's good, it's very limited in the scope. And I would think if we're going to go through the time and effort to have a real public process about that and gather up all of the information, my suggestion would be, let's approach NRC, at least initially, engage their interest in having an open space and recreation plan update, And then if that doesn't work, that we stick to, you know, a recreational asset plan, which would invariably include school fields, et cetera. And we can specify under whose auspices they are. We're not saying because they're in the plan, this means that all of a sudden, you know, Concord Recreation owns them, but that we are acknowledging that they're an asset for active and or passive recreation.
I like that idea, and I think it obviously would be very important to show who owns them, because I think I'm not sure that we have in one place what all these different assets are. So when conversations about building a new gym in the school come up, it's hard for a broader swath of the community to understand really what is the need for something that will have a real, you know, impact on their property tax bill. And then, you know, further, you're right with the trail system and natural resources. There are so many amazing recreational assets in Concord that I think we all sort of got a little bit more acquainted with during the pandemic, because it was like, what are we going to do now? Who wants to go on a hike? What are the hikes around here? Where can I take my kids? Oh, this is cute. I didn't know there was like a little cutback behind the police department in order to get to Fairyland, you know? So, you know, part of it can also be, so we have it all in one place for town planning purposes, but also it's a way to sort of bring more acknowledgement to these things. But I don't think there is one place where we can see all these pieces in one spot to figure out sort of what makes sense for the next purchase. Does, you know, all these projects that are coming up, does something already exist in town?
So it appears to me, and I could be wrong, but in my research, that there are 3 different studies that if you were to put 2 in total and then envision Concord in pieces, you would get a very clear picture of the assets that we can use for both passive and active recreation, regardless of who they belong to. But that means that somebody has to go and obtain those 3 documents and know that they have to put them together to formulate one picture. And so it may be as simple as updating the rec side and then asking whomever it is that's doing that to incorporate what's already been, I guess, quantified through the other 2 studies, or to do one that's a standalone. And I guess the first part of this is for the commission to sort of work on what is the scope that the commission wants to see. And that's sort of rhetorical now, but something that may involve at least, I mean, we're in a good position right now. The capital requests are not due until August or September. And so there's quite a few, you know, weeks and months that are leading up to that, where, you know, the initial thing that we would ask for is probably, you know, some type of consultant fee or something. And I would think that, you know, depending on the scope, it can range anywhere from 75 to, you know, more. I don't think that this needs to be necessarily as involved, but as Envision Concord. But it would be important for the commission to at least provide to me, because I would find it helpful, what are the goals and objectives of doing this, so that people aren't thinking that we're spending money just to spend it. What do we want to do? What are the, you know, do we want to just quantify how many things we have? Do we want to point out deficiencies so that we can talk to the capital planning task force and say, geez, we're really lacking in indoor space. We have an adequate amount of outdoor space, but we don't have indoor space. Or geez, we have a very large group of people who live in town who like pickleball, and we don't have enough, you know, locations for that. I pick on that because poor Anna has to hear from the pickleball folks, you know, daily, that we don't have enough courts that are striped. And is that low hanging fruit? Probably, but we haven't really justified, you know, how many people are doing that, or is it just the very loud minority? You know,
I think that there are 3 important components here that we're going to have to discuss over some time. One, of course, is the overall scope. We've been kind of, we've been talking about the overall scope, what's in, what's out. The second one is the process, right? I mean, how do we go about doing it? And the third one is duration. because, and that's really important. And looking at the previous plan, there was short-term, long-term, and there was like far out term. It's important for us to decide what's practical and appropriate. Is it a short-term or long-term? Is it a 5-year plan? Because, if you look at more than 5 years, things change and it becomes out there. So I think the duration, how far out do we want to look and plan for it? Is it one time period? Do we want to say what this plan looks like 5 years from now, or do we want to plan in smaller increments? So I think the whole duration. So the scope, the duration, and the process, I think, are the three pieces that are kind of up for grabs. We don't necessarily have to do it what was done in 2014.
Right. Well, I don't think that it was, I don't think that that was done in 2014. And I can just tell you, having come in and managed the Giroux property from its purchase through, we're about to put shovels in the ground next week. It would have been extremely helpful to have some document to point to, other than the West Concord Advisory Committee's document that just said that they would like more, open space and parkland sort of in their immediate downtown area. That was really the only one we were hanging on. And I have to say that the housing folks had a very compelling argument, and not for argument's sake, but to say, look, we've studied this. We don't have enough places that we can purchase property to be able to have, pods of affordable housing. And, I found that very compelling, both just as a staff member, but also as the Department of Human Services director, that they were absolutely right. There were two competing interests, and theirs, for example, had quite a bit of data to pack it up, and the rec side didn't, and it ended up that worked out in the way it did, which was great because we were able to negotiate, the break off of the parcel, et cetera. But, it certainly wasn't without some angst. And, I'm sure that there are people in town that are unhappy with how that turned out. So it would be helpful if down the line, another piece of property becomes available and it's, prime real estate for a soccer field, that there's something to point to that says we have a deficiency in soccer fields, for example.
Kate, I think you bring
I
up
have
a
a
really
property.
great point. And
46
I think
acres.
it's helpful, Paul brings up those three components are critical. And then if we sort of back further out, looking at the plan A, the plan B, the plan A would be ideally working with natural resources and doing a big review with, in coordination with them, proper ownership.
I think she froze. Casey, you with us?
I liked it so far.
Yeah.
Can you close the document? While we're
Yeah.
here?
Are we good? Are we good with that? Everyone's good with?
Oh, yeah,
that? Kate, I'll
sorry.
send this to
Yes.
you and-
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Can you see
Casey.
me now?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
back.
you're back.
All right. Okay, so plan A, plan B, plan A being a large scope of looking at all the town assets and working across commissions, departments, etc. Plan B would be maybe they've already updated things more recently, but incorporating those into the town's recreation assets, passive and active. And then I think as we back in, what's the purpose of this, Kate? Exactly, the Giroux property is a great example of it. Because when things come up at town meeting, when the town has to face decisions on what are we going to be investing our capital dollars in, and we have a lot of outside groups. I believe, Matt, you brought up the list is very long. Many of them have to do with public-private partnerships that are funding recreational assets. So where does all that come into play to make sure that when these decisions are being made that have real implications on people's property tax bills, they can feel confident in the fact that this is something that's been reviewed and we're not, that we're using what we have in an efficient and complementary manner. So if the school has something, the pandemic did bring a great opportunity for collaboration across departments that maybe wasn't always there. And rec in the schools was a great example of that with the after school programming and remote learning programming. So, and again, it may not be, there may be no appetite for something like that, but just so that citizens, when they're going to vote and they're coming to town meeting, they can be armed and informed with, don't we already have 6 soccer fields? Or why doesn't that meet the need? Or if we're saying, hey, this is prime real estate for 6 soccer fields, and we can take a look and be like, maybe it is, but we have other needs in the community besides 6 soccer fields. We're doing just fine with what we have. And though CC soccer may feel otherwise, here's the data to show what is here for use. And I think it just allows us to make better decisions as a town on behalf of all of us. And also with programming, it's going to be sort of the larger town funding decisions, but also with programming, making sure that we're covering the full breadth of, 0 to 100. So if we need more pickleball courts, that's really helpful to know, so that we're not just servicing young people, but we're servicing all ages. And that, I think, can help reduce some of the tensions. And when these, questions come up, they know that there's some study that's gone on behind it.
So what I'm hearing is our short-term but future goal is August, September, be prepared to go to special town meeting and potentially ask for some funds for a consultant, which leaves us with June, July, August to start on the scope that Kate's been referring to. So I'm wondering if, maybe our June meeting is dedicated to this topic, where we can really focus and start throwing things against the wall, try and come up with just everybody, speaking up about the concepts that we'd like to include. And then maybe there's a commission member that would be interested in working with me to compile, a starting draft of what those goals and objectives would look like that we bring, to the next meeting, and keep tweaking it from there. I'm just trying to think of the best place to start. The concepts, as we start talking about it, the wheels get turning, and there's a lot to consider. And I'm thinking it will be deserving of a whole meeting. And
we have a little legwork to do before that, because there's a choice between Plan A and B. We have to talk to some other committees, commissions, because that, we don't want to go into June, July, August without that, because we'll be missing the target, or overshooting or undershooting.
Sure, and I think that it'll be important to have some sort of group goal of, what is our wording going to these other commissions, to NRC or to, planning, or any of those other groups, to make sure that we understand what our basic scope is that we're asking about to start. I think that would be helpful for me, going to some of those meetings.
I think there's one piece, the purpose of the plan, which may seem obvious, but I think it's worthwhile discussing the purpose of the plan. Is it, for example, is it a document that defines our vision for what recreation assets look like 5 years from now? Or is it something other than that? I think because I think you have to start with that and work backwards, or else it's just a lot of thoughts thrown on paper.
Mhm.
And it's really how are you going to use it? How are the other department heads going to use this plan?
Mhm.
To support capital improvements, to grab an opportunity as it comes by, as a piece of land becomes available. I don't know how you let's figure out the purpose and how it's going to be used. I think, because I've done a lot of strategic planning that sits on a shelf, and then what really happens has nothing to do with that plan. That would be unfortunate.
I have another comment too. I think at a meeting or two ago, we talked about how to assess community needs for in Concord, and we mentioned, a great way to obtain that information is through survey through the community. So I was wondering what your thoughts on that were, and like at what time period would that come into play as far as the planning for updating the strategic plan? Because obviously it takes a couple months to create the survey, send it out, compile the data, that kind of thing.
I don't necessarily have an answer to that. I haven't personally done a large strategic plan like this for recreation facilities like this. So this will be.
Well, I mean, that's part of the process. Community input is absolutely vital. Question is, how do we get it? And when do we need it?
So it depends on whether you want to include that as a scope, or whether we want to do that ahead of time to try to develop the scope. So I've been involved in several, and they've gone we've done it both ways. And I have to say that having it as part of the plan and inside the scope has been a lot easier than trying to have people who don't necessarily do this for a living think up whatever the right terminology or vernacular in the questions are to get people to answer, because a lot of people feel like, well, that was a leading question, or that shouldn't have as much weight as another one. So I guess my suggestion would be to have community input in a various number of ways be part of the scope of whatever the RFP is that we're going to put out. So it's a little bit the cart before the horse, not because I don't like the conversation, but because I think if I can get or the commission can develop a couple of goals and objectives, it will certainly help me to be able to send the commission back some sample RFPs about, which essentially say, here's what we want, and you bid it out, and then consultants come in. And so I think a lot of people, you can stop me if you've heard this, but underneath Mass General Law, we have to bid that out, but there's two different types of bidding. And when we do consultant bidding, you don't have to take the lowest vendor. So it's not like we're stuck with the lowest. That would be great if it was, but essentially we come up with a criteria, 5 to 7 things, and whether it be that they've done, plans in the last 5 years in a community that's similar to this, et cetera, and you rank them. And then you take the 3 highest ranked persons who give you their proposals, and then you open whatever their price proposals are.
Kate, a quick question on the, how would the community input help us to define the scope of the strategic plan? I can see the community input providing a needs assessment, a granular needs assessment, but how would it help us define the scope? I'm just in your experience.
Sure. So what I've done in the past is to try to figure out where people think that we're lacking, and then that becomes the focus of the plan. So if people think that we have a robust amount of open space and passive recreation, and that we don't need any more, and I'm not saying that people think that, it's just this in the community that I had done that one in. They had said, in the past 10 years, we've spent X amount of $1 million on this and $0 on active recreation. And so that was not part of the plan, because it was already well represented and the community wasn't interested in that. I don't believe that that's the case here in Concord. I think that people are equally interested in all different types of open space and recreation, but that would be if you really wanted to narrow the scope down, but you wanted to make sure that the scope is representative of what the community feels that it should be, then those are the questions to ask before you develop a scope of services that you then bid out. I'm not necessarily hearing that from this group, but it doesn't mean that when you discuss it more that you may feel that.
Thank you.
So
I wonder, Anna, if, over the next, and obviously you don't want to violate open meeting law, but wondering if, a homework assignment of sorts would be to send Anna some of the goals and objectives, and maybe Anna, you can look and see if there's any common themes where you can just aggregate them into maybe 4 or 5 different bullet points that then I can kind of take a look and see if there's any proposals that sort of speak to those, end games, because that's always the nice thing, is to back into it. What do you want to, you're going to spend X amount of dollars to try to answer what? These 5 things, or you want to have something that represents what? And one of the things that I'm hearing right now is sort of, what is our capital planning as far as, putting assets aside or on, for active recreation versus passive versus housing versus whatever. And right now we don't have something that represents active recreation, the need for it in town, and the need for it to be on the radar of those who make the decisions relative to where the dollars are allocated or where the dollars are saved, for example. And that would be helpful, because in the past several years, there's been a lot of opportunity for active recreational purchases that really have kind of come out of the blue, and we've had to justify on the spot. And while the community has been very gracious and receptive of that, it would be nice if we told them so that it wasn't such a surprise.
So there are a lot of, chickens and eggs and carts before horses.
Sure.
But one thing that is central is, so what's our time frame of planning, strategic plan? Maybe that you want input on that, Anna, or maybe something we can discuss here.
Mhm.
But I think that's kind of really important. This isn't a plan for next year's operations. It's not a long-term plan next 20 years. What is the time frame of this plan? Because I think that's an important part of the scope.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So the earliest, realistically, would be probably the fall of 2022, which would be fiscal year 23.
I'm sorry, you misunderstood me. It's my fault. The plan itself, are we looking, not the production of the plan, but are we,
Oh,
is
okay.
this a 5-year
Five-year.
plan, a 10-year plan, a 12-month plan, or is it all of those? Because the previous iteration was a short-term, midterm, long-term thing. And maybe that's something we should provide input to Anna on, because, and not decide here, but I think that's, we need to think that
Input
through.
on that would be good. I would say that when you do anything that's a 1 or 2 year, so it says the short term is 1 or 2 year, it's almost immediately outdated by the time the thing gets printed. So,
Yeah.
I would say short term is probably 5 years, long term is 10 to 15, and then future would be whatever it is, and maybe it can't be captured because who knows, So I think that's when plans come out that say we're going to do XYZ in the next 1 year to 2 years, that's pretty difficult to achieve, and it gets a little
Well, that's not a strategic plan. That's more
it's a
tactical.
bummer is what
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, and that 5-year number sounds really comfortable to me, just knowing how quickly some of these fields are changing and future plans that I know are coming in 2 years, even from now. 5 seems really reasonable. And I think what I'd like to do on my own when I get offline is do a little research and see communities in Massachusetts and otherwise that have done large recreation facility or open space plans, and see what the vibe is for the time period that people are doing. See if there's a best practice that has a common trend among some of these plans. So I can commit to doing that and bringing that to the next meeting for sure.
And Anna, I have the town's last open space and recreation plan in my office. So I will make sure that I dig that out and give that to you, along with, there was an update. It wasn't as comprehensive, but the last one was very, very well done.
Okay.
So,
Great.
but it's just dated.
And I'd be happy to work with you to help sketch out like a draft of what the scope could look like based on some of this for the next meeting. So something for people to review. So if everyone's sending their, thoughts and ideas to Anna, we can sort of incorporate it into a draft together to start putting some shape to the scope.
Yeah, I think another driving factor is cost, obviously. And so I guess what I want to be able to provide is some idea when I come back to you to say, these are all great things, and this plan will cost $250,000. And we all say, whoa, that's far too much. I'm making that up, but I just think that we need to be realistic on, the dollars that are spent on something like this.
It strikes me. With hard work, we could write a plan for free, but I'm not saying we can do that.
I just heard Paul just said he was going to write the
No.
plan for free.
No,
is that in the minutes?
No.
During his breaks on CPC.
I've already
Paul at
volunteered.
work on NMI StartMet. He could do it too.
No, well, I'm not volunteering to do that, but I'm just saying this doesn't have. I think we probably need a consultant, and we probably will want a professional survey done. But I see this commission doing, splitting it up, doing legwork on some of this.
Yeah.
And maybe
Then
it's
that's great. Let's put that in the scope because it's only going to save dollars. I love that.
And we don't want to get over
There's
our
some real
skis in
talent.
terms of.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so people will email me some goals and objectives before the next meeting that Casey and I will try and draft into some sort of working document. I'm going to do some research on the best practices for the timelines that plans are inclusive of right now. And then we'll get some of that stuff to Kate as well and try and gather some other documents before the meeting in June.
Is there anything else I can provide? Because I have an extremely cranky second grader who needs his bedtime story, who just came down, dragging himself across the floor. was like,
Thank
I guess
you
I'll just tuck
so much.
myself in. Like, it was
No.
very pitiful.
Pete, did you
Go
have a
for it.
question?
Kate,
Solidarity, Kate.
Kate, if you're going to share some previous documents, could you share them with all the members of the group so we have?
Oh,
more
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep,
information?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, I'll send Anna whatever I have and she can forward it along.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank
Do
you
you,
so much.
so
do you
much.
also want a scanned copy of the former open space and recreation plan, or are you able to get that?
I would like to see that.
Linked online.
Okay,
I think we have it linked on our website. I've seen it. So I either have a copy here or I've seen it online somewhere. So
But we can make sure it gets out to everyone, Pete.
Yeah, I'll find that and I'll
Absolutely.
get it emailed out.
if you
with-
don't have it, I can find an electronic copy, you know,
Tell me
without
where to
much
get it,
effort.
that's all. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Sure.
you got it.
Kate,
got
thank you so much. We
Thank
really
you,
appreciate
guys.
your
It was
time.
great. Okay.
Good luck with
Thanks.
bedtime.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Excellent. Well, thank you guys. That's a good place to start, and we certainly have our work cut out for us. But I'm excited, and like I said, in the last 3 months that I've been handling the field scheduling, even and some of the community requests for use and improvements, the need for this and for a more formalized plan is very apparent. So comes at a good time. I'm excited about it. So
Anna,
being very
Sorry, just real quick. I think
Yes.
to Pete's point, what would be helpful, and we can put our heads together on this, is if you don't mind emailing out almost like a workbook of, I mean, it's probably just attachments, but so that everyone can find access to these things to review
Yes.
them in order to give the scope out.
Yep.
That'd be great. Sorry, I'll let you move on enough.
No,
what
we're
people
good. I
have
have
to say.
I have a big to-do list of those things. So I'll get those all to you hopefully in the next week or so. So being very aware of the time, it's 8:20. We'll wrap up by 9 o'clock as we always try. So the remainder of the meeting, the majority of it at least, will be just a preview of the FY22 budgets that have been submitted right now. So the enterprise fund and the recreation revolving account. So I'm going to pull those slides up. Now. Okay. So I had emailed everybody. Let's start here. I'd email you all the operating tables. So hopefully you had a chance to review those to have a bit of a frame for where the numbers are coming from, but we'll just jump right into it here. So the recreation revolving account, it's the account that the Hunt Recreation Center programming primarily falls under. It includes our youth and adult sports, before school, after school, early release programs, our preschool, special events, summer camp, White Pond memberships, not White Pond swim lessons, and our facility rentals. So those are the pieces that are involved in the operating table that you saw. And I think it's really important and relevant to give a very brief recap of what FY20 looked like and FY21 looked like, which directly led to the decisions that we made for our FY22 budgets. So the next couple of slides just briefly touch base on some of these pieces. So with the closure of our rec programs on March 12th of last year, we quickly decided as a department and as a community that our patrons were not going to bear the brunt of what was happening. So we provided refunds for all programs that had been paid for that would be running through that spring and that summer, which included canceling about 82 of our classes and refunding $65,000 within our general recreation programs. That was cooking classes, Lego classes, karate, things like that. School year programs, we refunded about $65,000 for half of the month of March that was missed. And then we did not bill people for April, May, and June, which was about $110,000 a month that was lost. And registration for this current school year halted. So we typically are taking first month's payment for the next school year starting in February. So while we did have some registrations come in, it came to a screaming halt. So the revenues for school year were significantly down at that point. And summer camp, of course, was dramatically affected as well. We had a lot of people, out of fear and not knowing really what was going on in the world, cancel as predicted, and withdraw from camp. And we let them do that without any sort of cancellation fees or penalties. So we ended up refunding about $100,000 for summer camp. Because of the governor's timeline, we also had to cancel our first full week of camp, and all of those funds were refunded as well. And we also were not allowed to do field trips and do some of the specialty programs. So by canceling those, that was an additional about $280,000 of lost revenues. So our fund balance for FY20 was a loss of $304,000. It was a tough end of that year, and not knowing what FY21 was going to bring and the opportunities that would be available to us. So it was a scary end to FY20. Looking at FY21, we had to start the year with a lot of the same program reductions as FY20 ended. So all of our popular youth sports programs and activities were canceled. So our youth basketball program, our ski programs, musical theater, all of those programs. The schools also, of course, were not allowing outside groups to come in, which canceled all of our in-person, in-school classes, which was a huge loss for the students and for the budget. All of our adult sports were put on hold. The buildings have been closed to rentals and still are, and all of our special events were canceled. So the impacts on FY20 were lasting. Thankfully, over the course of this year, as you all know, the regulations have loosened and have made more programming possible than we initially expected, which has really helped this year turn around, and we'll get to some of those numbers soon. So with close coordination from the superintendent, we were able to open remote learning programs at the elementary schools in place of our after-school program. So we supported about 125 students across the 3 elementary schools for that remote learning portion of the day, which was 12:30 to 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. A lot of kids, of course, went home, but we did see, about 65-ish kids per school stick with us and be with us until 3:30. So the monthly billing across all of those programs was about $109,000. So as related to a regular school year monthly billing of $110, we were pretty close to what we would have been collecting for after school with a smaller quantity of kids. The cost of remote learning was more than after school typically is. So it kind of kept us afloat this year, being able to run that program. Just as we got our feet under us, the governor decided that schools needed to go back to full day in-person learning. So our remote learning program, and therefore that revenue, came to a halt on April 5th, not too long ago, about a month ago. And we only were able to open our after-school care model, which hasn't seen a lot of support from families right now. A lot of parents are still working remotely and don't necessarily need that after-school care like they used to. But we are helping 140 students across those 3 elementary schools with care from 3:30 to 6 p.m. And as you can see, the monthly billing across all of those programs dropped from $109,000 per month to about $56,000. So nearly in half for our final 3 months here of April, May, and June. So looking at the numbers right now, the revised estimates for FY21 were $130,000, the operating income rather, and we're looking pretty good to hit that number as of right now. Summer camp registration has helped dramatically with the regulations being lifted, so we're seeing a really great response for camp this summer, which will function in FY22, but the funds come in FY21. So we're on track right now to hit this number. We've also seen a really great response for White Pond memberships this summer. We just sold our 600 membership today, and those revenues are higher than they've been in summers past. So that's also helping us. That's about $93,000 right now in memberships for White Pond.
Hey, Anne, a quick question.
Yeah.
In previous times, we discussed the general fund transfer, general fund services.
Yes.
on multiple occasions, and I'm looking in some of the detail how that's impacted FY 19 and 20.
Yep.
But there's an agreement that there won't be general fund transfers and born in 21 or 22. Is that the case?
Correct. We have been extremely grateful that the town supported us in eliminating those expenses for FY 21 and FY 22, and we're very aware that that is not something to expect for all future years. But it's been extremely helpful in our bottom line by not having to transfer those funds out this year or next.
And that accounted for a big part of the operational loss in FY 20, because it's 247,000 in general fund transfers, and you lost 303. Yeah,
Yes.
pretty good.
Significant, very significant.
Significant, but I mean, just from a pure operating standpoint, you weathered that storm terrifically.
Yeah, we came out okay on this side. We really did. And like I said, the more these regulations keep opening and the reintroduction of programs that we're able to see in this fiscal year, the better this number is going to look. So we're reopening all of our adult sports next week. We're expanding outdoor sports. Summer camp is pretty much sold out. So we're feeling very, very lucky that the tables have turned and that we were given the opportunities we were this year. Matt has a hand up.
I was just applauding because I'd say this is a remarkable recovery. Just to see things in the black for this, first of all, for FY 21, that's just unbelievable. But then also, looking forward in FY 22 with increasing revenues. So, my appreciation goes out. But the thing I was curious about is, we do have these so-called ARPA funds that are coming to the town. I think it's a little over $5 million coming to the town. I don't know whether any of those go here, but it is just something to look at. And, I heard that CARES funding wasn't available for this. I just wonder about PPP and all those other programs. It just seems remarkable that, again, businesses all around the country have been able to recover, quite a bit of their losses. And it didn't seem like any of that applied here. And I guess you just sort of fell through the cracks of these programs were designed for various types of organizations, but not this particular type. Is that the thing? I mean, I guess you guys must have looked pretty hard.
Yeah, so we did code all of our PPE and any direct COVID related expenses towards those CARES accounts, and we just got some notifications of
Right,
the audit.
Minor compared to like recovering lost employees.
Oh yeah.
It's a lot of the country, businesses have been able to do.
Right. Yeah. No, we spent a lot of time exploring as many options as we could possibly think of with HR and finance and the town manager's office, for those first 4 months or so, and didn't see any opportunities that could, support that sort of relief for us, which, as a result, we did have to furlough all of our part-time employees at the recreation center and at BD, which was a significant savings, but a sadness, of course, having to put those people out. So we did what we had to do to save where we could, recognizing that there weren't funds that we could pull to support those losses.
Okay.
So, even though it was a nasty year programmatically and planning, we have an excellent team here, and we're a skeleton crew here and at the BD Center right now. And I've never in my professional career worked with so many dedicated people that would drop everything for this town and for this department to make sure we're moving forward, as I've met in this team in Concord. And as a result of all the hard work of all these people, Andy's staff and the staff in this facility, we had a lot of great accomplishments in FY21, and we've had a lot of great positive things happen to us amidst all of this. So we were the only circus in town last summer that successfully ran summer camp, and we supported 700 kids in our community that wanted or needed care. We facilitated the remote learning programs, honestly, without a hitch. With the planning that was put into place with the superintendent, the town manager's office and facilities, we were able to support hundreds of students in those programs. And we only had 5 positive cases from the start of the school year to April, which is phenomenal, and really speaks to the commitment that the families had as well as our staff to really stay loyal to the rules and regulations that kept us healthy and kept us operating. There was really no programmatic loss for the kids. It ran all school year. Amidst it, we onboarded our 2 new recreation supervisors who have been a phenomenal asset to program development and planning. We facilitated online classes and events for the community in place of what's typically in-person events to make sure that people knew that Concord Recreation was still here for them and wanted to make sure that we were all laughing and finding smiles in some capacity. We formalized our field reservation process, recognizing that people did want to get outside and groups did want to figure out how to play as the regulations allowed them to. We utilized our new software to make all that digital, and so the community could see of the recreation assets that I schedule, what was available, and we've received good feedback on that. And then we've just continually pivoted to the needs. So we've made sure if, the schools tell us that there's a child who lost a parent to COVID and they needed care that next day for the next month, we made sure that that could happen. We provided financial assistance to those who needed it and those that were embarrassed to apply for it this year because they've never had to apply for it before. So we worked really hard to continue to be a community advocate and a really involved portion of our community. And I'm very proud of our team for what they did this year.
You guys really did a phenomenal job. And I think also just Anna, you guys had 0 positive cases over the summer. Is that correct?
Correct.
And those kids that summer, to really just drive this home for those of you who didn't have the distinct joy of being indoors and homebound last spring with young children, the rec camp was the first time that they got to be around other kids that weren't in their families, that they got to get outside of their house. And you guys provided a safe, thoughtful, and environment and really communicated well with the families. So hats off. And you guys turned that around in a matter of weeks, basically.
Yeah.
There. And again, with the rec program, with the after school, that was critical to parents who were trying to figure out how to do this nightmare of remote learning. So hats off to all of your team. And I know Marty played a big role. I saw her at Thoreau, and you had a great group at Alcott and Willard as well. Yep. So, I think to the effect that it means something if we can just note in the notes the recognition from the commission for what a great job you guys did this year and with all the obstacles that you faced.
Thank you. I'll definitely pass it along to everybody. And, thankfully this is a group that is accepting of thanks. They're a very gracious and grateful group of people. And again, this town couldn't have a better team of recreation staff, in my opinion. So moving forward, the FY22 budget goals became very simple. We wanted to prepare for the effects of COVID, but expect a greater return across all programs as we saw over the course of FY21. And we wanted to reflect on FY21 to make some programmatic adjustments to reduce our future expenses. So again, while the year was really difficult, it forced an exercise of really evaluating what was necessary and what wasn't. And as a result of that, we've been able to identify significant savings areas that we don't see a future of having those pieces need to come back. I think over the years, we've gotten a little fat in providing certain pieces within our programs that weren't necessary, but were a great touch and a great thing, for the community when we were able to do that. But nobody has missed those pieces being gone this year, and it has been a significant savings. So again, a forced exercise that probably wouldn't have happened without COVID. So here's the quick outline of operating expenses for FY22. You'll see that the largest expense continues to be and always has been personnel services. That includes our full-time, part-time, limited status, and temporary status staff, including their benefits. That accounts for over 100 people, from our office clerks to our site supervisors, to our basketball coaches, to our school year staff, and then all the full-time staff, the recreation supervisors, senior administrative assistant, an administrative assistant, a child care manager, and hopefully soon an assistant director. digging into those and showing them in a different way, again, you can see the huge impact that personnel expenses have. And for FY22, it's important to note minimum wages increasing. So that's accounted for here. We're adding more limited status staff to our weekend hours to better support our programs now that our custodial hours have shifted. The rec department, or the Hunt side of the rec department, is now going to support a third of the salary for an aquatics director. That person is going to help us oversee some large aspects of White Pond and Emerson Pool, and that was something that we didn't have in the past. It does not include any salary for the recreation director. That all comes from the general fund, and it assumes only a 2% cost of living increase for FY22. So no merit raises outside of cost of living. Here's a snapshot of the operating revenues. So all of our, almost all of the recreation department's programs and services operate on a user fee basis. It's a fee for service model that we typically follow. So all of those revenues fund our operating expenses, which also include our equipment and in-kind financial assistance. So our financial assistance program isn't necessarily funded. We just eat the cost that's awarded to people. So that's a model that we're exploring, how we can get, you know, a kitty where we're pulling from, instead of just spending or taking it off the top and just eating those funds. So we're exploring those options as well, which has been great.
And the two questions on this,
Yeah.
The visitor center revenues goes away. What's
Yeah, so good point. Thank you. So there's been discussions going on over the last year and a half or so about economic vitality in Concord and how that plays a part with visitor center and tourism services. And the visitor center is going to be moving to the planning department and take on a combined economic vitality role. And it just made more sense for economic vitality, which is a huge initiative and passion of the town managers, to take the lead on tourism, and it made more sense for it to be with Marsha Rasmussen in planning. So Beth Williams and her services and staff will be shifting to that department, and we're preparing that transition with Marsha's team now to make sure that it's smooth for July 1.
Great, thank you. And the other one, the summer camp, the revenues projected for 22 are less than 19. Is that fewer campers, or?
Yeah, so the regulations in place for summer are still a bit limiting compared to the general regulations that are out there. So we still have to have certain spacing requirements,
Okay.
Which allows what usually is a group of about 25 kids to be a max of 15 for us this year. So those numbers are down slightly. And we are not running our Trekkers summer camp, which is a 7th and 8th grade group. We didn't have the response this year. So
Okay.
Those account for the adjustment.
Thanks. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So here's again the snapshot. You can see how dependent we are on those school year programs running. We were pretty panicked in May and June last year when we weren't sure what the fall was going to look like. And again, are so grateful for the relationship that has been strengthened this year with the school department. And summer camp is a close second. So we're grateful that camp is looking, you know, as it is this year, and that future years, I think we'll be able to bounce back no problem. The other important pieces to note for the revenues of FY22, we have decided to expand the preschool program to have a 5-day option. In the past, it's only been a 4-day option. And I didn't even, honestly, Ryan and I didn't even recognize that for some reason. We just we didn't recognize it. So when we talked about that this spring, Anita Stevenazi Hill made a commitment to getting a 5-day program in place, and we've seen a great response for that, including some new families, which is promising, you know, that we'll get some more siblings and growth. So that's accounted for. We're planning to be back in the schools this fall. While that's not confirmed in terms of programming, we're optimistic that the trends will allow us to get back into the schools. So those programs will come back. We'll be running our ski program again, basketball program again. And we've expanded our adult sports and outdoor sports. So we're going to be running more tennis in the summers, and we're going to be moving it to West Concord as well, which we typically haven't done anymore, to make sure we're supporting that neighborhood. And we're expanding our pickleball programs. So we're going to be working with some vendors to run pickleball classes, not just competitive play that we typically do now. So those are in direct response to community requests this year. Those sorts of individualized sports have seen a pretty big uptick and requests for space. So we're hoping, this meets the needs of the community and the voices that we've heard thus far. So it's important to note, and if I could go back a couple slides, our FY22 expenses mimic those of FY20. And you're probably thinking, well, how could that be? You're planning for growth, and FY20 was, pretty tough end there. But like I said before, we're removing about $15,000 in expenses from our school year programs that we used to spend on food and snacks for the kids. And again, that was a luxury, not a requirement. There's been no complaints about not having snacks and food available for the kids this year. So that's an easy, we're cutting it. So we're saving significantly there. We're not running any field trips this summer. And even though field trips might be booked in FY21, the checks go out during the camp week. So in FY22. So we'll have a significant savings of about $60,000 on busing and field trip admission fees. We won't be spending money on large special events for FY22 for the near future. Typically events like Jazz Fest and our concerts and the movies in the park, those are just expenses. We don't create or produce any revenue from those. So that's a significant savings. Like Paul noted, the visitor center operation has been removed. That has been a large expense and not much revenue. We're moving in, and Beth is doing a great job moving in that direction, but it's been more of an expense than a profiter. And we don't have any large capital, computer capital or building improvements planned for FY22. Of course, if anything of safety or necessity does pop up, we'll address that as it comes, but we're not planning this year for any large adjustments. So that's why it looks more similar to our FY20 expenses.
Just a quick question, Anna.
Sure.
About the operating expenses. So White Pond, the proposed improvements,
Yes.
when would those expenses hit? Like what fiscal year?
So they're gonna start on that project, like Kate said, in the next 6 to 8 months. So once the summer's over, they're gonna try and do a portion of the project this fall. So maybe some of the tree removal and some of those pieces. That budget won't hit the recreation accounts.
Oh, at all? Okay.
Yeah, that's its own beast. And so what you see in White Pond is the staffing expenses, the supply expenses, the safety equipment that our lifeguards use at the beach, things of that nature is what we'll pay for out of this account.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to ask about that bullet about the, concerts, Jazz Fest, Bike Fest, and movies in the park. Just because, I mean, it's obvious that you've got a budget to balance, but it's also just a different role that the rec department plays here in creating kind of an esprit de corps, with the community, with running these kinds of events. And I do think that they serve a great purpose, and we should perhaps look at them differently. And gosh, it would be great to kind of have an identified funding source for these kinds of things, just given that you do need to make your budget work.
Yep.
How much do these kinds of things usually cost? I mean, just like the 4th of July 5-mile run, is that an example of one of those kinds of things?
Yep, and it's important to note too, so when this draft budget had to really be finalized and submitted, it was, February, March. The regulations at that point in time still were max capacities for outdoor events of 150.
Right, so you're assuming this is sort of a one-time thing.
Yes, definitely.
It's not like you're saying, oh, we're abandoning all this because, they don't make any money.
No, not at all. And that was, an initiative that we were excited about when Chris Whalen pitched this to us, a couple of years ago, that he really wanted to see us commit more energy and opportunity to the community to just come together for free.
I think it really does help a lot with just a sense of being a Concordian. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're not abandoning them at all. We will be running some special events each month. They just won't be at the level and expense that these were. So for instance, we're doing a virtual fishing derby right now for the month of May. Next month, we're doing a mother-son superhero virtual night. So we're trying to offer some events, but they're at a much smaller scale, and therefore, we're covering the costs with some small admissions fees.
Right, some of them have some fees, yeah.
Yeah, $10 to enter the fishing derby,
Right.
for instance, things like that. So, no, these will definitely come back.
Okay.
And I know Beth is going to be planning some events too. So Jazz Fest was typically a visitor center event, as well as the holiday parade in December. So those things will stay with visitors and tourism and
Okay.
planning, and move forward there.
Got it.
And when and if do any operating expenses on Giroux hit us, or is that never, where does Giroux sit in the future?
Yeah, so Paul, honestly, I haven't been close to that project yet. And we haven't talked about it much with everything else that's been going on.
Okay.
So I don't have an answer for you yet on that one.
Okay, thanks.
So revenue similarities are mimicking that of FY19, our last really healthy year. And the reasons for that are we're expecting the full return of school year programs. We're expecting a really strong registration next February for summer 22. And we're absolutely expecting the return of all of our regularly operating programs, including musical theater, adult sports, everything that I've mentioned. And White Pond sales are higher than they've ever been this year. And we have wait lists of people wanting to join. So White Pond is a huge asset for the recreation department now, and was a great acquisition by the town. And we're so grateful to be managing and operating that. It opens this weekend.
But I saw that revenues were down from FY19 for White Pond.
This
like 102 or something, and went down to 75.8.
So we planned for a similar revenue of last summer, not knowing what this summer FY22 would look like. And there's no restrictions at all at the beach this summer. There's no reservations, there's no masks, there's no spacing, there's nothing, which allowed us to open up a lot more membership slots. So we planned on about a $75,000 summer, and we're at 93 right now.
Okay, so you're going to go over the budget on the revenue side. It's great. Okay, thanks.
Yep. So that's the quick and dirty of the rec revolving, and I know I only have about 10 minutes left. So sorry, Andy, I'll scoot through this. If there's questions, let's save them to the end so we can just you can get the grasp of all this. So BD, the enterprise, the swim and fitness fund, includes our group fitness, our personal training, swim programs, memberships, and facility rentals. Just like the recreation revolving side of the operation, BD was one of the first fitness facilities in the area to close its doors on March 13th. All the programs for the spring and that summer were canceled, equating to about $83,000 of refunds. All of our part-time staff were furloughed, saving about, I think it was $10,000 per week. Yeah, $10,000 per week there. We decided to put memberships on hold, and to do that, we adjusted prices to $1 per month just to keep people in the system, keep those communication lines open, which was a significant revenue loss. And we didn't take registrations for spring or summer programs. So, so the start of, or the end of FY20 was rough. BD had a healthy year before that. So we were looking at a loss of about $267,000 to end FY20. Moving to FY21, things didn't initially get much better, like we were seeing at the Hunt side of the operation. So BD staff returned to the office on June 28th, and then the facility itself opened to the public again on July 6th. They saw about 65 members come back on opening day, which out of 1,300 memberships, wasn't super promising. Andy and his team worked overnight to get the space ready. Just like camp, the regulations came out, what was it, Andy, a week before you were allowed to open, and we couldn't afford to be open one day late. So they worked very hard to get the facility set up. These are some pictures of what it currently looks like. And because of the spacing requirements, the the regulations only allowed the building to open at 50% capacity, but because of the size of our spaces, the pool deck was really only open at about 25% and the fitness rooms at about 13%. So even though we could have opened to 50% based on the rules, our facility didn't allow it. To manage the occupancy, TJ and Andy set up an online reservation system that members had to participate in. And we've seen a pretty good fill rate on those reservations. As of end of April, there was about 65,000 reservation slots available, and we'd had about 53,000 of those time slots filled. So each machine had a time slot and a reservation through all hours of being open, which is, you can imagine, quite the matrix for them to manage, and they've done an excellent job at doing that. And this is a really important chart to note. It's our memberships by category and by the last 4 years. And you can see the dramatic decrease in our FY21 numbers. What's important to note, I think, is as of February of 20, we had about 1,300 memberships, 1,303. As of March this year, we had 999 memberships total. So across all of these categories here. And we know that 377 people canceled their membership. But the data, these numbers show us that 304 people were what's accounted for here. So 73 of the people that canceled out of the 377 transitioned to a different membership type. Looking at our 3-month pass here, those numbers are up bigger than any year. And we really haven't seen many new faces coming into the building. So without spending tons of time looking at names and comparing, we're assuming that 73 members canceled their full memberships and transitioned to these 3-month memberships. So it was nice that we didn't lose those 73 people, but it's a significant cost decrease in the membership and therefore loss of revenues. But when you do the math of it, we've had about 76% of members remain loyal throughout COVID and these strange times and the rules changing all the time. So they do have a strong customer base of those that are there. We're just not seeing new people come in. And Andy, I know you mentioned today, if you want to chime in quickly, that even in the last 2 days, there's been some adjustments.
Yeah, we've seen a little adjustments as people see the rules loosening up. They sort of come back to their accounts and say, okay, where do I stand? So a lot of our communications sometimes get lost, I think, with a bigger picture of what's going on regionally to nationally, that, we've had a bundle of members, around 40 that, just weren't paying their bills. And with it, just weren't using the facility. So we really needed to get at eliminating those names from our roll call, we'll say, to certainly have them as a future contact. But this opening of the state has been great, and it's continued to be great. It's just also just had people reconnecting with us and saying, where do I stand? Well, you've actually lost some of those communications. We've had you in our facility. We took you off that hold, and people just lost it in the shuffle. So we've had some of those cancellations coming our way to refunds. Really just wanted to honor and be, we'll say, a good citizen as we manage people.
So of course, those are concerning numbers for us. And Andy and I, maybe at the next meeting, to give everybody some time, we'll talk about some of the strategies that we're hoping to put in place to try and better recruit and sustain new members, which we desperately need. So these next couple of slides just are a snapshot at some of these big program areas that I mentioned in the beginning. So group fitness is one of them, and you can see the dramatic hit it's taken. Group fitness continues to be the program showing the slowest return across the entire department. A lot of places, and I'm sure you've seen, are doing online fitness classes, or there's tutorials on, a fitness program that's self-directed that you can do at home or, in your driveway. So we're losing people to programs that we're not necessarily even sure of. We're losing people just for the fact that they might not be ready to come back. So group fitness is concerning. The regulations that will be in place on May 29th no longer require any sort of spacing limitations or group sizes. So we will be able to reopen our group fitness opportunities full swing. Some of the spacing requirements did limit our options. So we only have so many spaces that could accommodate 6 people, or 6 feet of spacing between people. And, you know, looking at the instructor cost, we needed a minimum of 6 people in a lot of the classes to run, and we weren't seeing those. So a lot of classes had to get canceled because we weren't in a position to lose revenue on a class this year. Personal training also has taken a bit of a hit, you know, especially in the beginning. People were definitely not comfortable coming close contact with one person, even with a mask on. So Andy and his team have been working really hard to reach out to their client base and do online virtual training for those that are interested in doing that. Now that it's warmer weather, they're going to be moving outside, and our last trainer is finally back and working. So we're hoping that some of those clients will return as well. So definitely a slow return, but it's promising. These numbers right now were for, I thought I had written it down. Andy, what was it? 190 training sessions?
199.
Yeah, account for that revenue for this year.
And, you know, just to touch on it, you know, this summer is going to be a different one as well. There's, you know, quite a few vacationing approaches happening, and we see that on the staffing front to on the membership front. People are really sort of doing that catch up. So, you know, this personal training, I think, is going to remain a little bit on the flat side until we get back into the fall, where people will say are back in their normal routines with school systems and jobs, working a little bit less remote, to saying, yep, you know, how do I get back into programming, and personal training will be one of them.
I have more slides. So aquatics programs, you'll see, you know, they didn't take too bad of a hit. Aquatics programs always are small group, especially our small group lessons. It's about 4 kids. And the spacing availability in the pool allowed us to keep that for a lot of classes. Andy also started offering more private classes and things like that. So swim programs have done okay. I mean, compared to 2019, we're down $100,000, but compared to FY20 and what the other program areas have looked like, swimming is doing pretty good. We're excited about that. So again, a lot of silver linings and a lot of things to be grateful for over the course of a really tough year. And again, a lot of that is the loyalty of those that did stay with us. It speaks to the staff up there and the facilities and the efforts that were put into making sure communication was clear and the facility was sparkling clean and feeling very safe. And again, about 53,000 out of 63,000 reservations have been filled, which is a pretty impressive quantifiable number for us this year. They also figured out ways to still host a couple of very important community events, including the Nick Ressler Blood Drive. And they've done some Friday night family events to try and get some new faces in the building. They've redesigned the fitness spaces to maximize user opportunity, and some of those things are probably going to stick. So some equipment that wasn't getting highly used got removed and it hasn't been missed, allowing, you know, for more opportunity for members and the machines that they prefer. We also saw an outside user group or 2 come to us that lost pool space because facilities closed. So we're kind of seeing this niche opportunity to get out and put some boots in the ground to try and solicit new rentals. And so that'll be something that will push forward into FY22. And Andy and his team also did a great job using the shutdown as an opportunity to get a lot of projects done that needed to be done. So they replaced the HVAC units on the roof. We added pool deck showers, which have been a huge help and success. They've installed some touch-free sinks. They've shocked the pools, and they were able to do all this stuff at a time when we were closed, so we didn't have to close in August when we typically do to make these updates happen. So kudos to them and the facilities team for making it work and being brave enough to come in and be together during that time and make these things happen. And Andy also renegotiated our cleaning contract. So that's a significant expense. We contract out the custodial services at the BD Center for 7 days a week. And it's a large expense, and he was able to work with that organization to bring the expense down significantly. And that's one of those opportunities that we're exploring to see if something like that can stick for future years. So we had the same goals for BD as we did for the Recreation Revolving Fund: prepare for the effects of COVID, but reflect on those programmatic adjustments to reduce future expenses. Let's see. So looking at FY22, and I know this is a very busy slide, but you'll see that it's showing a net loss of 497 this year, with the addition of the non-operating revenues from investment incomes. And we'll talk briefly about the breakdown of this in the next slide. So the largest operating expenses, just like the Recreation Revolving Fund, are staff. It's about $1 million, and it'll be spent on the full-time, part-time, limited, and temporary status staff and their benefits. It continues to be the largest expense, and we expect that to be the case year after year. It takes a lot of manpower to run these facilities. So that includes over 100 staff, lifeguards, trainers, fitness instructors, all of those sorts of the folks that work with Andy. And those are the backbone of the facility, truly. The second largest expense area that you can see here, the personnel services, that includes things like the electric, the natural gas, water, sewer, banking charges, payroll charges, and that contracted custodial service that I mentioned. So it's a significant expense, about 30% of the operating budget. And a large portion of those energy expenses go towards running the dehumidification system that keeps the space operational, and the pool's chlorinators, which are huge. So it's really expensive to run the pool, especially in New England, you know, in the climates that we have here. So Andy worked really hard, again, during COVID to work with different departments in town to figure out ways that we could save some of these energy expenses, including getting a thermal cover for our therapy pool. So the therapy pool is at what temperature, Andy?
90 degrees, a little hot.
90 degrees. And that hot air just, you know, goes off the pool, and the motors work to keep it at 90 degrees. So by adding these thermal covers, they've been able to better manage that expense. And while we might not see large savings right now, we're expecting over time a significant savings with those energy expenses. And it's also important to note on here that the BD Center is also not getting charged general fund expenses for FY21 or FY22, which we're extremely grateful for and know to not expect it in FY23. And similarly, looking at the revenues, we're looking at a revised budget showing about $1.5 million in revenue for FY22. It's about a 27% increase over our FY21 numbers, which is promising, and it's a lofty goal for us. But Andy and I feel like we have a good plan in place and a team that's willing to work hard to help us meet this goal this year. And we're, of course, dependent on membership growth and people coming back to programs. And we have no reason to think that they won't be returning to programs as the weeks push on here. And so importantly, this chart looks at the fund balances. The BD Center operates under the guise that we should always have at least 6 months of operating expenses in our reserve. And that red line shows where that is right now. And so we're in a safe place. We have a fund balance that is able to support us. And, you know, the department will continue to work really hard to be creative and innovative with our programs. So this number and this plot on this chart, you know, doesn't significantly decrease over the next year or two. So, so that again is the fast and dirty of the BD plans for FY22. And if anybody has any questions, I recognize I went 7 minutes past already. So the BD Center is going to the warrant for town meeting on June 13th. We have no reasons to think it won't pass, but we'll be there and be prepared to help answer any questions if they do arise at town meeting. So if you hear of any questions or concerns, of course, reach out and let me know. So,
And I'm trying to recall, I think it was on the consent agenda.
yes.
Yeah, so, I mean, unless somebody really comes and
Yeah.
decides they want to pull it off the consent agenda, there won't even be,
Yeah.
any debate.
Yep. Prepare for the worst, that's what I say, but yeah.
I
So,
think just a general comment, Anna, in Andy, great job trying to build back, and it looks like it's going to be a multi-phase approach to get the budget back to where it should be. But maybe some opportunities are outlined in there for further discussion, like increasing the aquatics programs, which seem to have built in more revenue. And I mean, I know we're doing private swim lessons and it's been great. It's been a game changer. So, if there's in the future, if there are some sort of brainstorming that we should do in terms of membership, bringing in membership, and what are the programs that are really the ones that can be built out to offset some of the dip in recurring memberships. That might be something for us to consider going forward. And thank you guys for all the work to just try to piece things back together and hang on during the pandemic.
yeah, absolutely. And
Terrific.
yeah, Jen, do you have a question?
Just a quick comment too. I know that COVID has brought a lot of families from the cities into the suburbs like Concord. I know a lot of people now their kids are starting kindergarten, they're renting, they haven't found a house yet because they want to live here. So I think that's another wonderful opportunity for you to reach out to new parents, new families moving in here with kids. Because swim lessons I know are hard to come by now. A lot of my friends, we can't get our kids enrolled in swim classes. So that's like Casey said, just an area for growth.
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
talked about, developing stronger relationships with the realtors and getting some information into those welcome baskets that families get when they buy a new house, and making sure that information on BD is in there.
And based on the state changes that just came about, we did a tweak this past Friday to the state really mandated or opened up for May 29th. We're going to go towards June 1st with our opening with the holiday on Monday. But with it, it's just an opportunity for people to come in and use us on a day basis versus before. So this is a good transition period where, the new people to town, not just coming to our Friday Family Fun Night open houses once a month, but on a daily basis, besides just tours, they could actually use our facility. So June 1 is a key date for us, and looking forward to it.
One question I have, I know we talked about this not last summer, but the summer before. And Jen and I had a conversation with you, Andy, with all the kids who do camp. Is there a way to put like, here's your kid's swim level, and then here are our fall or summer and fall classes at BD Center, and like even a schedule, and call this number or sign up here to, continue their progression. And then also like to tie that into the preschool. If there's like, you're going to have more members of the preschool, can you put in here's our fall swim schedule, and have it see how it aligns maybe with the schedule for the preschool? You know what I mean? So if it's like, we've got, a toddler swim class that is, Jen, you'd be a perfect person to pull for this. Like, what time does preschool end that you need a little break, and then you need an activity because you need to kill time until dinner?
Absolutely. We're looking forward to White Pond getting back into swim lessons this summer. We don't consider it competition for us. We do American Red Cross. They do a bit on the generic side at times, but with it, our progression will certainly be something that we could highlight to all those kids coming out of those classes, saying, yep, you had a good summer experience in an outdoor environment. Guess what? We can really get at your swim mechanics and improvement in a indoor controlled space come the fall. So looking forward to certainly White Pond getting towards the swim lessons and how to sort of play off that.
And Anna, is there something you can do at camp where at the end of each week, the families receive an email saying like, here's your child's, so like something that it's hitting them on paper and hitting them electronically to get them looped into continuing the swim progress?
Yep. Yeah, we're committed to doing that. We won't be offering lessons this summer at camp. Again, we weren't prepared with the way the regulations were to coordinate that, but we will still be marketing opportunities and white pond lessons and things like that to as many families as we can.
The swim lessons at White Pond, I think I went in like Monday morning at 8:30 and it was already waitlisted. I was like shocked.
Yeah, we have about 15 kids in the wait list for each of those classes. And the biggest issue right now is finding water safety instructors. It's an expensive certification to receive, and kids can go work at other places where it's not that expensive to work there. So that's a struggle that we're running into, but we're working on finding some instructors so we can train some people in-house and hopefully double those lesson quantities at White's. So very quickly, staffing updates. The assistant director job is posted. Applications are being received through the weekend. And we are in discussions with the town manager on reposting the aquatics director position that we weren't able to fill with the first candidate pool, and exploring a marketing and special events manager for BD as well. So more to come on those. Program updates, I think we've kind of covered that in some of these slides. So if anyone has any questions, I welcome them, but things are looking good for the summer, which will bring us to reports from liaisons. So Matt, any select board updates?
Well, I think that the main thing is just that where we've ended up in the middle school with the gym. And so I don't know if those of you have heard about it, but the compromise that was worked out was, and we're still waiting to see the actual design, but in terms of kind of the formula, was to use the length of the MIAA court and its runouts as the width of the two cross courts. So that's the constraint that we've applied. So it may not be the full 46-inch width, 46-foot width that the Concord Carlisle Youth Basketball was asking for, but it probably will be more than the 42 feet that was previously proposed. And so that would provide more of a 3-foot line, maybe not the full width, but more of something. And so I guess because there isn't an official regulation size at the middle school level, that it would be a usable court, in those two courts anyway, for their purposes. So we're still working out then, okay, what does that result in? I'm sorry, somehow I went blurry. In terms of the total size of the gymnasium, but that we're having a meeting next week where those numbers should be shared. So I think that's the main recreation related update I have. I mean, we're dealing with all kinds of other things, regional dispatch centers, all kinds of junk in the select board, but that's recreation.
Thank you. Dick's not here for finance and Paul's not here for CPC. So that brings us to public input, which nobody has joined us. I have no old business for tonight unless anybody else does. No. So next meeting, we are looking at June 29th is the last Tuesday of the month. How does that work for everybody? It'll be on Zoom, again, to clarify.
Yes.
Good.
That works. It's just whether or not it competes with finance committee or select board or.
Yep, works.
All right.
And will we have a new person, a new member at that time?
Hopefully, yeah, we're meeting with two folks that are interested tomorrow. So hopefully
Great.
one of them will join us. Yes.
Okay.
Good luck in the meantime, Jen. Fingers crossed for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It could be 2 to 4 weeks. We'll see.
Wow.
It's exciting.
Hey, Anna, can you send
Wishing-
copies of those slides to us?
Sure.
Those are great.
Yep. Do that. All right. So Casey, if you want to close us out.
Make a motion to close the meeting.
I second.
Thank-
So moved.
Okay, I'll go through roll call. Casey Atkins, aye.
Paul Bohm, aye.
Pete says aye.
Jen Lutz, aye.
So it's 9:17, Andy, for the minutes. And thanks, everybody. We'll get the minutes out, and I'll get all these documents sent out that I promised for strategic planning and the presentation.
And
Thank
we'll
you,
get to our,
Anna.
we'll get to our homework assignments at
Yes.
some point.
Yes, that's right. Yes. I will remind
Thanks.
you. Don't worry. Thanks, everybody.
So long.
Thank you.
care.
Bye.
Good night.